Hello and welcome to Moments in History. I'm Linda Shenton Matchett, author, speaker, and history geek. While researching my books, I unearth tons of intriguing historical information that does not end up in my stories. So I've created this channel so I could share those tidbits with you. The 1938 New England hurricane was one of the most deadliest and most destructive tropical cyclones to strike Long Island, New York, and New England. The storm formed near the coast of Africa on September 9th of that year, becoming a Category 5 hurricane before making landfall as a Category 3 hurricane on Long Island in September 21st. It is estimated that the hurricane killed 682 people, damaged or destroyed more than 57,000 homes, and caused property losses estimated at $306 million, which equates to $4.7 billion in 2017. Damaged trees and buildings were still seen in the affected areas as late as 1951. It remains the most powerful and deadliest hurricane in recorded New England history, perhaps eclipsed in landfall intensity only by the Great Colonial Hurricane in 1635. The United States Weather Bureau was unaware that a tropical cyclone existed until the 16th of September. By then, it was already a well-developed hurricane and had tracked westward toward the Sargasso Sea. It reached hurricane strength on September 15th and continued to strengthen to a peak intensity of 160 miles per hour near the Bahamas 4 days later, making it the Category 5 equivalent hurricane. The storm was propelled northward, rapidly paralleling the East Coast before making landfall on Long Island and Connecticut as a Category 3 equivalent hurricane on September 21st. After moving inland, it transitioned into an ex-tropical cyclone and dissipated all over Ontario on September 23rd. At 9 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on September 21st, the Washington office issued storm warnings north of Atlantic City and south of Block Island, Rhode Island, and southeast storm warnings from Block Island to Eastport, Maine. The advisory, however, underestimated the storm's intensity and said that it was farther south than it actually was. The office had yet to forward any information about the hurricane to the New York City office. And at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, the Bureau downgraded the hurricane to a tropical storm. At 11:30 a.m., advisories mentioned gale force winds, but nothing about a tropical storm or a hurricane. That day, 28-year-old rookie Charles Pierce was standing in for two veteran meteorologists. He concluded that the storm would be squeezed between a high-pressure area located to the west and a high-pressure area to the east, and that it would be forced to ride up that trough of low pressure to New England. A noon meeting was called, and Pierce presented his conclusion, but he was overruled by Chief Forecaster Charles Mitchell and his senior staff. In Boston, meteorologist E.B. Rideout told his WEEI radio listeners, to the skepticism of his peers, that the hurricane would hit New England. At 2 p.m., hurricane-force gusts were occurring on Long Island's South Shore and near hurricane-force gusts on the coast of Connecticut. The Washington office issued an advisory saying that the storm was 75 miles east-southeast of Atlantic City and would pass over Long Island and Connecticut. Reanalysis of the storm suggests that the hurricane was farther north and just 50 miles from Fire Island, and that it was stronger and larger than the advisory stated. The majority of the storm damage was from storm surge and wind. Damage was estimated at $308 million, and the equivalent of $5.1 billion adjustment for inflation in 2016 dollars, making it among the most costly hurricanes to strike the U.S. mainland. Approximately 600 people died in the storm in New England, most in Rhode Island, and up to 100 people elsewhere in the path of the storm. An additional 708 people were reported injured. In total, 4,500 cottages, farms, and other homes were reported destroyed, and 25,000 homes were damaged. Other damages include 26,000 automobiles and 20,000 electrical poles toppled. The hurricane also devastated the forests of the Northeast Kingdom, knocking down an estimated 2 billion trees in New York and New England. Freshwater flooding was minimal. However, as the quick passage of the storm decreased, local rainfall totals with only a few areas receiving over 10 inches. Over 35% of New England's total forest area was affected. In all, over 2.7 billion board feet of trees fell because of the storm, although only 1.6 billion board feet of the trees were salvaged. The Northeastern Timber Salvage Administration was established to deal with the extreme fire hazard that the fallen timber had created. In many locations, roads from the fallen tree removal were visible decades later, and some became trails still used today. The New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad from New Haven to Providence was particularly hard hit, as countless bridges along the shoreline were destroyed or flooded, severing rail connections to badly affected cities such as Westerly, Rhode Island. Due to the lack of technology in 1938, Long Island residents were not warned of the hurricane's arrival, leaving them no time to prepare or evacuate. Long Island was struck first before New England and Quebec, earning the storm the nickname Long Island Express. Winds reached up to 150 miles per hour, with waves surging to 25 to 35 feet high. Yale and Harvard owned large forests managed by their forestry departments, but both forests were wiped out by the hurricane. The western side of the hurricane caused sustained tropical storm-force winds, high waves, and storm surge along the Jersey Shore, and destroyed much of the boardwalk in Atlantic City. The Brigantine Bridge was destroyed over the Absecon Inlet between Atlantic City and Brigantine, New Jersey as well. The metropolitan area escaped the worst of the storm and wind and storm surge because it was hit by the storm's weaker western side. Winds were recorded at 60 miles per hour at Central Park. Battery Park recorded sustained winds of 70 miles per hour, with gusts of 80 miles and 90 miles per hour was recorded 500 feet above ground at the Daily News building. Winds were estimated at 120 miles per hour on top of the Empire State Building. Eastern Long Island experienced the worst of the storm. The Dune Road area of West Hampton Beach was obliterated, and storm surge temporarily turned Montauk into an island as it floated across the South Fork at Napateague and annihilated the tracks of the Long Island Railroad. 10 new inlets were created on eastern Long Island. The surge rearranged the sand at Cedar Point Lighthouse, so the island became connected to what is now Cedar Point County Park. The surging water created the Shinnecock Inlet by carving out a large section of barrier islands separating Shinnecock Bay from the Atlantic. The storm toppled the landmark steeple of Old Whalers Church, which was the tallest building in Sag Harbor, and the steeple has not been rebuilt. Storm surge hit westerly Rhode Island at 3:50 p.m., where the tide was higher than usual because of the autumnal equinox and full moon, and the hurricane produced storm tides of 14 to 18 feet along most of the Connecticut coast, with 18 to 25 foot tides from New London, Connecticut east all the way to Cape Cod, including the entire coastline of Rhode Island. The storm surge was especially violent across the Rhode Island shore, sweeping hundreds of summer cottages out to sea. As the surge drove northward through Narragansett Bay, it was restricted by the bay's funnel shape and rose to 15.8 feet above normal spring tides, resulting in more than 13 feet of water in some areas of downtown Providence. Eastern Connecticut was on the eastern side of the hurricane. Long Island acted as a buffer against large ocean surges, but the waters of Long Island Sound did rise to great heights. Small shoreline towns to the east of New Haven experienced much destruction from the water and winds, and the 1938 hurricane is indeed the worst natural disaster in Connecticut's 350-year history. The mean low water storm tide was 14.1 feet at Stamford, 12.8 feet at Bridgeport, and 10.58 feet in New London, which all remain a record high. Actress Katharine Hepburn waded to safety from her old Saybrook beach home, narrowly escaping death. She stated in her 1991 book that 95% of her personal belongings were either lost or destroyed, including her 1932 Oscar, which was later found intact. Along the Stonington storefront, buildings were swept off their foundations and found 2 miles inland. Rescuers found live fish and crabs in kitchen drawers and cabinets while searching for survivors in the homes of Mystic. The eye of the storm followed the Connecticut River north to the Massachusetts, where the winds and flooding killed approximately 99 people. In Springfield, the river rose 6 to 10 feet above flood stage, causing significant damage. Up to 6 inches of rain fell across western Massachusetts, which combined with over 4 inches that had fallen a few days earlier to produce widespread flooding. The storm entered Vermont as a Category 1 hurricane at approximately 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, reaching northern Vermont, Burlington, and Lake Champlain around 8 p.m. Hurricane-force winds caused extensive damage to trees, buildings, and power lines, and over 2,000 miles of public roads were blocked, and it took months for crews to reopen some of the roads. In Montpelier, 120 miles from the nearest coast, salt spray was seen on windows. Even though the storm center tracked further west through Vermont, New Hampshire received considerable damage. As in Vermont, very high winds brought down numerous trees and electrical lines, but rainfall totals in New Hampshire were significantly less than those in other states. At Mount Washington, winds gusted to 163 miles per hour and knocked down part of the trestle on the Cog Railway. In Maine, buildings and trees were damaged and power outages occurred. Storm surge was minimal, and winds remained below hurricane strength, and the storm did not claim any lives in Maine. The Great Hurricane spurred the creation of many new sawmills in the region, and the storm downed so many trees that the federal government scrambled to figure out a plan to get rid of them. Landowners were directed to bring their downed trees to designated dumping areas in ponds, lakes, or fields. One of these, Turkey Pond in New Hampshire, had 12 million board feet of white pine, the largest deposit of hurricane salvaged logs in New England. But most intriguing is that the banks of this small pond were home to the first woman-operated sawmill in the country's history. Called on by the federal government after the hurricane of 1938 and at the height of World War II, the group of Concord area women who operated the mill lugged, lawed, and cut their way into history. Before they became trailblazers, they were clerks, hospital employees, housewives, and teenagers. In operation for 2 years, the women's mill was an important part of her post-hurricane cleanup in the region. It was billed by the government as its first-of-a-kind operation. And on October 29th of 1942, an article in the Concord Monitor described adjustments that had been made for female employees. The mill will have many safety devices never before considered necessary for the protection of the women workers. It is also being rigged up with automatically operated saws and chain drives so that there will be no heavy lifting or pulling for the feminine crew. Starting pay was $4 a day. At the time, a waitress made about $1.40 a day, while retail clerks made about $1.80. Work usually started at 9 a.m. and ended about 4 p.m., with forestry employees giving rides each way. Cigarettes were smoked, naps were had, and friendly competition with the all-male mills were common. The girls gathered around a small camp with a wood heater on chilly days and shared stories. The mill operated for a little more than a year until Turkey Pond Mills completed their government contract. 5 years after the first logs were delivered to the Durant Mill, the last timbers were sawed November 23rd, 1943. I hope you've enjoyed today's moment in history. If you'd like to learn even more history, please stop by my blog, which can be found on my website at www.lindashentonmatchett.com. And please consider subscribing to my channel and clicking the bell icon to receive notification of new episodes that release on the second and fourth Fridays of every month. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.